15th of May 1981. This was the anniversary of our wedding, and it was our diamond wedding anniversary. Well, our golden wedding anniversary had been celebrated at Sheila's. She'd acted as the host for the occasion, and even my 80th birthday also was celebrated at Sheila's. But for the diamond wedding anniversary, because Mum couldn't go out now, of course it was celebrated at home. And of course there was only me to prepare everything, and I couldn't do that. So Eileen and Sheila both came and did all the work of preparing the food and that sort of thing. And they stayed for tea, and then the son and, well, most of the family who live around here, they all came to see us on that particular day, and all brought presents along with them. I know one of the presents we appreciated very much because it was from Sheila's children, our grandchildren, and they'd bought us one of those quartz clocks, and we've still got it now, of course. But we had a very nice day, and everything went off well, partly due, as I say, to the way Eileen and Sheila had organised it. And of course there was photos taken and all sorts of things, and it was overshadowed a little bit, of course, because of Jeff's accident taking place previously. And Jeff had had a very bad time. In fact, he was unconscious for about a fortnight, I believe, and we were all very worried. And I think during the first week, at any rate, we didn't really expect him to live. But they do some marvellous things these days with the brain. And then he was at Derby first for his operations on his brain, and then they brought him to, I think it was the City Hospital. Yes, I'm almost sure it was the City Hospital. I know it was one of the Nottingham hospitals, and after he'd been there a bit, I went with Frank to see him. Of course, we couldn't speak to him because he couldn't speak, and he was more or less only semi-conscious then. And I did go again later on when he'd been moved to the Queen's, and even then he couldn't speak to us, but he was conscious at any rate. But of course it was a very trying time for Sheila and Frank, and of course all the family, but them particularly because they had got all the weight of it. And it was a long time before he was really what you could call out of danger. And then it had left him that he couldn't speak, and he was more or less paralysed down one side. But of course they've done a lot for him in the hospitals, and one way or another, and he's had speech therapy and all different sorts of things, so that today is actually in his own bungalow. But of course he's a long way from being right yet. I don't know whether, well, I don't suppose he ever will be absolutely right, well again. One thing with Mum not being able to get out, Eileen had arranged for her hairdresser. Her first name's Catherine, but I've forgotten what her second name is, but she lived in Peveril Road, practically opposite Eileen, and Eileen got her to come down here. John brought her, of course, in the car, he brought her down here in the car and to cut Mum's hair. And she came quite a few times after. The next item of news really is that Mum received word that her Uncle John had died, and he was a marvellous man, Uncle John was. Uncle John Parr, his full name was, of course. He was Mum's mother's brother, and he used to knock about and go for long walks even when he was turned 90. And as I said, to live till the age of 96, that was something marvellous. And it's quite possibly he might have lived longer if they hadn't have had the accident with the gas stove when he was living with Aunt Edie, because it practically was the result of it was that she died, but he got better, but it's quite possible he might have lived longer but for that. In October, we had a visit from David and Margaret and the 3 children. We hadn't seen them for years, so because David, like his mum in a sense, he'd knocked about, been in different parts of the country after he'd got married. By the way, he was now a schoolmaster, and of course he seemed to keep changing from one school to another. A very studious kind, and never could learn enough, and I suppose he couldn't settle in one particular school, but we were very pleased to see them, not having seen them for so many years. Then there's one thing I forgot to mention, of course, that I'd bought a tape recorder at this time to fill the time in. I was interested in that sort of thing, and apart from that, of course, I'm very fond of nice music, and I found it was a cheaper way to listen to nice music and record it than and then have it played on tapes where I could listen to it over and over again. It was far cheaper than buying gramophone records. We'd got quite a few gramophone records, but it was far less trouble to put a tape on than to get the gramophone out and play records on it. Another thing about this time was a question of life insurance policies. You see, the inflation had risen to such an extent that the amounts that we had been insured for to cover when we died for all burial expenses and all that sort of thing, well, they just wouldn't go anywhere near what was being charged these days. At one time, you could a funeral only cost you about, at the most, £50, and now they were costing $200 and $300, and sometimes right up to $400. And of course, our policies didn't cover anything near like that. So, and as we were over a certain age, we couldn't take new policies out for a bigger amount. So what we did, we just surrendered the policies that we'd got, and we put we got an increased surrender value, of course, than we'd expected, and we put that money in national saving certificates. And these particular kind of national saving certificates, they worked in relation to the rate of inflation, so that they called them granny bonds. And the idea was this: if inflation increased, the amount you received back when you surrendered those certificates would have increased also according to the rate of inflation, so that you could buy enough certificates at a certain particular time to cover what you thought your funeral expenses would be. And then, of course, as the rate of inflation went up and funerals cost more, so that the amount you'd get for your certificates would be more, and you'd be able to pay for your funeral just the same. You wouldn't be left, as we would have been, left in a difficult position. This particular Christmas in 1981, of course, I told you that we'd stopped going out to our daughters for Christmas because Mum couldn't go out. At this time, Eileen and John came for tea with us on Boxing Day. We couldn't go to them, so they came to us, and that about ended anything worth recording for this particular year. Well, 1982 started with some very severe weather. Most of the country had very heavy falls of snow, and it was very cold. But it seemed that around the Nottingham area, at least, although we had falls of snow and frost and usual wintry weather, but we didn't seem to get heavy falls. Ours was just a few inches, where in some parts of the country it was a few feet. In February, Mum unfortunately had a fall in her bedroom, and as a result of this fall, she'd struck her head against the dressing table as she fell, and she must have caught her knees somehow too. But we had to have the doctor, and then the nurses started to come because she had to be washed and all that sort of thing, and she just couldn't get out of bed, couldn't do anything for herself. So, and although I did as much as I possibly could, there was a limit to what I could do in that respect, particularly when it came to washing her. So that was why we had the nurses coming. And on and off, from then on, she wasn't well at all. And we had first one doctor coming and then another doctor coming. First it was Dr. Hutchinson, and then Dr. Rodriguez, and then Dr. Birchall. They all came in the turn and all prescribed something different. But it went on like this. Mum stopped in bed, and it went on like this for a matter of, till nearly into April, right into April. And but at the end of March, Joan came. And of course she was still at Swanmore, and it was a long way for her to come. And she only came once a year, usually. She stayed for quite a bit this time. I forget how long it would be, at least a week anyway. But while she was over here, I recorded her voice. I pretended that I was interviewing her, asking her questions, but the main thing was that I was getting her voice. because Joan herself had been ill, and of course when they live so far away, and you wonder what's going to happen. And so I must admit that I was a bit afraid that in only coming once every 12 months, anything could happen in that time. And if anything did happen, I wanted to have a record of her voice. I also tried to get a record of Mum's voice, but she stopped me from recording it. And I'm sorry to this day, I'll tell you, very sorry, more so today than ever, because that one thing I would have liked would have been to have listened to her voice again. There was one thing when she was upstairs in the bedroom all the time. That front bedroom that she slept in is a very cold bedroom, and when you were sitting talking to her, you could feel your back getting really cold. And I know I used to go up in the afternoon and I'd perhaps sit an hour or two talking to her, and by the time I came down I was thoroughly chilled, and it was more due to a draft. If I'd have put the electric fire on, it wouldn't have been sensible, because for one thing Mum would have been too hot then because she was warm enough in bed. It was just this kind of draft that seemed to come upstairs and get through the door and go right round the walls of the bedroom. And as a matter of fact, Eileen came one afternoon and she sat talking to your Mum most of the afternoon, and the next day she had quite a bad back. And of course when she rang through, or John rang through and told me the next day that Eileen had this bad back, I realised at once what it was due to. So we got to considering getting Mum downstairs. Then it would be better not only for her, but for all of us. For her particularly, because she'd have somebody to talk to all the time. She wouldn't be left on her own upstairs. And for us, naturally, we wouldn't have the running up and downstairs and having to sit in the cold bedroom. So it was decided to bring her downstairs. And on the 16th of April, Sheila's husband Frank and Richard brought a bed, a single bed from Sheila's, and they brought it and put it up downstairs in the living room, and they carried Mum downstairs and put it into it. And then from then on, it was a kind of a different life in our house, because Mum she didn't like being left at night on her own downstairs, so as a result of that I had to sleep downstairs. And I had one of these folding beds that you keep for putting anybody up in an emergency, and I had to sleep in the kitchen on this folding bed. And I got used to it in time, but it wasn't very nice at first. And of course, one of the troubles was that the first thing you had to do when you got up in the morning was fold all your bedclothes up and fold the bed up and put it away before you could start doing anything. And you had the same job at night. Before you could go to bed, you had to put the bed down and put all the bedclothes down. But I didn't mind doing that so much. I mean, that's just one of the things that you have to put up with when you come across these things. Because, as I say, I gradually got used to it, and it seemed just as natural as going up into my bedroom and getting into an ordinary bed. But Mum didn't seem to, well, from that time on, she seemed gradually to start slipping. And she was complaining of her knees being sore, and sometimes she'd be sick. She'd go days without eating anything because she felt sick and she couldn't bear eating anything. And sometimes if she did eat it, she was sick after it. And it wasn't due to the food, because I was eating the same food and it wasn't upsetting me, so it was obvious that it was your mum's state. Mum was now more frightened than ever of being left. Before, she hadn't minded me going out and doing the shopping, even into Beeston. But now she didn't like to be left at all, not for any length of time. And so what happened was that Sheila used to come, and she used to come in the car, and she'd run me down to the high road and then run straight back to your mum, and then I'd do the shopping on the high road and come back by bus. And we continued that until the time when she was taken to hospital on her last journey. Well, she had another fall too, and that made things worse than ever. She lost heart herself, and we had the doctor again, and he said he'd send a doctor from the hospital to see her, and a Dr. Mullery, who was a specialist on, I don't know, I think it was on nose, throat and ear and things like that. It was a general, I think that was his main thing, but also he must have had a lot to do with physiotherapy, because he came one evening and he examined Mum, and then he said he wanted to see her in the hospital at his clinic, and then they could take x-rays and all the usual things that they do in these cases. Well, the outcome of it was that they decided that your mum needed physiotherapy to help her to get about. They thought it was a bad thing for her lying in bed, and the best thing they could do was to try and get her on her feet again, and then she'd be able to knock about, and she'd be better as a result of it. And so he decided on this physiotherapy, and your mum had to go twice a week for this physiotherapy. Well, I can tell you, neither Mum or I liked it, because what used to happen was this, that she had to go by ambulance. Now, and the ambulance, if she was going in the morning, the ambulance would be here soon after 8 o'clock, and but it wouldn't take her straight to the hospital. They'd got other people to collect, and it looked as though we were the first people they collected, because they went all round Stapleford, Sandy Acre, then through to Chilwell, and gradually found their way back onto the Derby Road here. And by the time they got to the hospital, it was nearly 10 o'clock. Well, then when you got to the hospital, then Mum would have to wait her turn to go in and see the specialist, and then she'd have to have her physiotherapy, and when she'd had her physiotherapy, she'd have to go and sit and wait until the ambulance came to pick her up. Well, the trouble was that of course, we'll say she might have had a physiotherapy by 11 o'clock, but the ambulance might not come till any time between 12 and 1 o'clock, and she'd got to sit there waiting for the ambulance to come and pick her up. And where they used to make them sit waiting for the ambulance, it was right opposite the entrance to the main hall in the hospital. And there was terrific, of course the door was constantly opening and closing, and you got a terrific draft through, so that what good the physiotherapy was doing, the draft was doing more harm to her. And another trouble was that sometimes, of course, I've always wanted to be there with her, and she wanted me with her as well. And sometimes the ambulance men would let me travel with your mum in the ambulance. Other times they wouldn't. A lot depended on the ambulance team and the driver or the other fellow with him. But so sometimes they let me ride and sometimes they wouldn't. Well, if they didn't let me ride, I'd got to go separately on the bus, and then I'd got to sit there and wait for Mum, and then wait till, and then I'd got to leave a bit earlier than your Mum, so as I'd be there to open the door when the ambulance arrived with her. It was quite a mess up, and neither of us enjoyed it, particularly as the trouble was she wasn't getting any better. If she'd have been getting any better, and well, you could have put up with quite a lot, but she wasn't. And the end of it was that we decided that taking her for this physiotherapy was doing her more harm than good, and we thought the next time we went to see the specialist, we told him so. So he agreed that it would be just as well if we knocked off. So we did do. About this time too, Sheila had got what they call tennis elbow, and she had to go to the hospital for a check-up. So we're all getting in trouble one way or another. Then the next important thing was that Lynn, Sheila's youngest daughter, flew to Canada. And of course that was quite a remarkable thing, because none of us had ever, well, I don't remember at this time whether Sheila and Frank or any of the others had already flown to Spain. But at any rate, nobody had ever flown as far as Canada before, so we were all a bit excited at the thought of Lynn being over in Canada. And while she was there, she actually took the plane from there and had a run into America. I think she went to New York just for a look round and then back again. But things were happening, weren't they? Then in August, Eileen had a granddaughter born. Donna was born to Bernie, and of course they were all excited, and because it was her first grandchild, and they'd been waiting for something like this to occur for a long time, because I know Eileen wanted to have a grandchild to see, but of course I went to, John took me about a fortnight after she was born. John took me to Martin's so that I could see Donna. And of course your mum was still in bed and she couldn't see her. So about a fortnight later, Martin and Bernie brought Donna to show to your mum. In September, Joan came again to see us, and I'd been trying for a long time work it so that I could take Joan up to Rainhill to see all my people again, because she hadn't seen any of them for about 23 years. In fact, I think the last time she'd been to Rainhill was when she went for borrow Aunt Tilda's wedding dress for her own wedding. So it gives us some idea how long it had been since she'd been to Rainhill again. And the trouble over the last few years, of course, had been that, as I keep stating, I couldn't leave Mum for any length of time unless there was somebody to look after her while I was away. And we'd never been able to arrange it while earlier, because Eileen was at work, and Sheila was at work certain days, and well, all the three, Eileen, Sheila and Lynn, were all working. Well, the trouble was, as I said, that we've got to have someone who could drive us up to Rainhill and someone to look after Mum while we were away. We were only just intended to go for the day, but I'd never been able to work it, or we'll say it never worked out that way in previous years. But this particular year, I don't know how it happened that Eileen was free, but anyway, Eileen was free that particular day, and all three of them were free on the same day. So it was arranged that we would take Joan up with us while she was over, and that's what we did. I went, of course, along with them, and when we got to Aunt Hilda's, she'd got the whole family gathered to meet us, so it was like a wedding, almost like a wedding, because she'd got a good show of food and everything, and we all sat in the parlour. She'd got the big tables in the parlour, and we all sat together in the parlour, and we had a real nice time. But I was very pleased because I wanted Joan to be able to see her relatives in Rainhill, and now that she'd seen them, I was more satisfied. Later on, next month, I think it was, John and Eileen also went to pay them a visit at Rainhill. So the whole family went up in during those 2 months. And then Mum's sister Jessie had a son who lives at Leicester, and she'd come to spend a week with him. So while she was there, we got in touch, and it was arranged that she would come over at the weekend. So they did. They came over at that weekend on Sunday and paid us a visit. And of course, Mum hadn't seen her sister Jessie for a long time, so naturally they were very pleased to see each other. Then the next thing was that Eileen started with eye trouble, and like your Mum's troubles, it persisted. Although she went to see the doctors and she went to see specialists, they didn't seem to be able to do much for her. And it wasn't until she gave up going to work that there seemed to be any improvement. She's certainly better today than she was at that time. Mum's knees were gradually getting worse, it was it had developed arthritis, and she could hardly walk. And we had to get a walking frame to help her to walk. And when she got out of bed and wanted to go to the toilet, she had to walk with the walking frame, and I had to walk behind her in case she slipped or anything. So it was quite a job every time she went there. And another thing, the toilet was always a cold place, especially in winter. So I decided to get a fan heater, and so whenever Mum wanted to go to the toilet, I had to put this fan heater on and warm it up before she went. Otherwise, it was most uncomfortable. And we were pretty near Christmas when this happened, and of course I used to get a Christmas gift every December from the rally. They were very good in that respect. Apart from the outings that we used to go on, they always made us a good Christmas box. And in fact, in my case, it amounted to as much as £18. And it used to come in very handy at Christmas. And it was when I'd got this £18 that I went and bought the fan heater. I thought it would be a good way of using the money. And we're right in December now of 1982. And one thing about with John being so far away, it meant that if she sent Christmas parcels to different members of the family up here individually, it cost her quite a lot of postage. And it was the same with us. It meant that if each of us sent our own presents to Joan, collectively it cost quite a bit to do it. So what they started to do was that Joan would put all the presents in one parcel and send them to me, and then I would keep them until Christmas, and then Eileen and Sheila and Martin and those who Joan had sent presents to could have them at Christmas. And the other way around, Sheila or Eileen and any of those who wanted to could include their presents in the parcel that I was sending to Joan. So, we saved quite a bit of postage that way, and with the cost of postage constantly going higher and higher, we were very glad to do so. There's one thing for quite a time now, neither Mum or I had bothered to see the new year in. We were usually ready for bed by about 11 o'clock, and we didn't feel like sitting up as we used to do at one time to see the new year in, so we didn't bother anymore. And that was about the end of 1982. I can't remember a great deal of what happened in 1953. I suppose with Mum being downstairs and me going out very little, there was really very little happening out of the ordinary. But about Easter of 1953, my ankles started to swell, and I didn't bother with it first, but when they began to get a bit painful, I went to see the doctor. Dr. Hutchinson was that busy that I was pushed on to Dr. Birchall, and unfortunately she herself had had an illness and been off for a long time, and when I went to see her, she never even properly looked at my ankles and just prescribed something to get rid of the fluid around my ankles. Well, it turned out that although that was part of the trouble, there was also a bigger trouble, because I started to take these tablets, and on the Sunday, my left leg particularly was so painful that I could hardly stand it. So I got on the phone and I rang up the doctor, but I got the answering service, and they put me through to an emergency doctor in Nottingham. And he came round after, and he prescribed tablets for it and also painkillers. But I kept on taking these, and of course the painkillers were helping to keep the pain down, but it went on right into the next week, and when the painkillers were finished, the pain was that bad I couldn't stand it any longer, and I phoned up for Dr. Hutchinson to come. Well, as soon as he saw it, he said it was a blood clot. And of course he prescribed. Well, he sent the nurses. He had a nurse come down, and he told her to get some bandages and to bandage me feet and ankles. And also he prescribed certain things. Well, I'm glad to say that the fact that I was now being treated the right way, the pain gradually began to go. And although I was about a fortnight before I was really on my feet properly again, it did eventually go altogether. But the fluid round, especially around the left ankle, has still remained, and I'm still taking tablets for that to this day. But it's not painful, so I can stand that. But the pain from the blood clot, it was really pretty bad, that was. I could hardly bear, well, I couldn't bear putting my foot down. I think this was about the last year that I went on any of the rally outings, and it was to Blackpool. Of course, when I went on anything like that, going away for a day, I had to get Eileen to come and stay with Mum, because of course she couldn't be left. But I know this was the outing to Blackpool was the last that I went on, and I really enjoyed it. But I didn't do a lot of knocking about when I got to Blackpool. After we'd had a dinner there, I just sat. It was a nice day, by the way, a nice sunny day, and I was able to sit on the pier, and I sat there from dinner time to tea time. But that was all I wanted to do, was just take it easy and rest. And then later on, Frank and Sheila took me for a day to see my brother and sisters at Rainhill. And we had that was another nice outing, because I think I'd been going pretty regular. I think I'd been the summer before, although I'm not sure now. I can't remember all these little things offhand. I've got to look them up. But I certainly enjoyed going up, but although we had quite a lot to do in one day, Frank drove the car and Sheila and I travelled with him, and we went first to my sister Alice, and we got there about 11 o'clock probably, and we had coffee and biscuits there, and after staying about an hour there, we moved on to my brother Arthur, and it had been arranged that we should have dinner there. So we did have dinner there, and we were there about a couple of hours, and then from there we went to Mum's sister, and we stayed about an hour there, and we couldn't stay any longer. Her sister's name was Marion, by the way. It was her youngest sister, but because she still lived at the Old, whenever I'd gone to the Old, I've always followed visiting her, if it's only been just to go for about an hour and say hello, and that's all we were able to do more or less this time. We hadn't time to stay longer than an hour. And from there we usually would have gone to Sister Hilda, but she wasn't well at the time, so instead we went to Sister Phoebe, and we had tea there, and we stayed there till it was time to come back. So Frank brought us back in double quick time. It didn't take us as long to come back as it did to go, but it doesn't usually when you go on outings. The only other thing was that I was every so often I'd got to send for the doctor to Mum, because she had so many things plaguing her at this time that even they couldn't treat them all at once, and if we were treating one, the other was getting out of hand. And it was if it wasn't the arthritis, it was her ear. On this occasion, I think it was her ear that I had to send to the doctor for. But we had to keep sending for him whenever these things got bad, and it meant